We've used the word passion as an acrostic for pain accepted so that sin that's inflicted on others or by others is nixed, nullified. Pain accepted. What we see in the passion of Jesus in the last part of the Gospel of John is that Jesus is going to the cross. He's enduring incredible opposition. And he's facing all kinds of pain and beating and being rejected and being left alone. But he does it because it is his passion. It is his mission. He realizes that God has a bigger purpose than just comfortable living. Jesus didn't come to have a nice, comfortable life. He came, and that was the mission. It was his passion. So that sin that's inflicted on others or inflicted by others is nixed. So today we're in John chapter 20. I invite you to turn in your Bibles there, and as you do, I'm going to ask if Marissa would come up. And she is going to share. Marissa and Abel have been coming to ACC like a whole month now. Yeah, something like that. A month or 2 months, and I was just speaking with them. Actually, we were talking at our last picnic, which, oh, by the way, after church today, we're having a picnic. And so if you going to meet outside in the play yard, and we're just going to enjoy time together. This will be a great chance for you to meet Marissa and Abel and Patrick and Cameron and anyone else. You might be thinking, well, I didn't bring my problem. There is. Nope, it's this week. Yep, always check your electronic bulletin. So that is happening this week. And so we are going to meet, and there's restaurants around you can order food. Okay, so anyway, that's a quick announcement. But Marissa, I heard some of your testimony. It takes way more than 5 minutes to share, but you have about 5 minutes to share. And this is just going to whet everybody else's appetite. They're going to be like, wow, I want to know more. And then they're going to come and talk to you, okay? So thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa, as you heard, and that's my husband, Abel, over there. And like you heard, we've been coming to ACC for about a month or 2 months, and Pastor John asked me to share my testimony. So when I think about my testimony, 2 words come to mind, and that is random nobody. Because when I look at the gospel and I look at who Jesus is and who he chose a bunch of random nobodies to share his word and to share who he is with other people. And that's what I see when I look at myself, because when I was 8 years old, God chose a random nobody to have his first encounter with. And I was in my laundry room and I was praying to God to heal my dog who was sick. And the only reason I knew who God was in the first place is because my family had done a brief stint of going to church for about a year. That was my only experience with God growing up, and then we stopped. We never went to church again. And so I knew who God was, but I didn't really know who he was. But I was praying to him anyways because I had heard that I was asking him to heal my dog, and instead dog was going to die in 3 days. And you would think when you hear that that's a bummer. But in fact, what that gave me is comfort in knowing that I knew about a God who was so powerful that he looked at a random nobody and said, I'm going to comfort her through her first loss in her life. My dog did die 3 days later. And though it was sad, it was also comforting because I saw the power of God. And after that, God kind of went on the back burner of my life because I didn't really have anybody telling me about God or talking about like who he was. And so he was kind of on the back burner until I was 16. And I started volunteering at Salvation Army. They told me that they were also a church, and they said, you should come to church on Sunday. And I said, okay. So I came to church on Sunday, and that was when I really learned who God is, and I devoted to serving God. And through that, like 6 and 3, I was able to share with them who God is, and I was able to bring them into youth programs and all those good things. And then through that, when we would have youth events on Sundays, I was able to bring my sister, who's 18 years older than me, to church as well, and I was able to share who God is to her as well. And then I was able to share with my mom who God is through that as well. And so my entire immediate family found God because he used a random nobody, at that point a random 16-year-old, to share his word to my entire family. And since then, while I was attending Salvation Army, my heart word to the church. And luckily my pastors felt the same way, and they invited me to preach on Sundays using their pulpit. And so now God was using a random 17-year-old with no formal theological training and said, you are going to share my word to all of these people much older than you and wiser than you. And through that, I was able to preach a few times through the mentoring of my pastors at Salvation Army. Since then, looking at my life overall, I see that although I've had a life that has been filled with suffering, and I've suffered abuse and abandonment and all of these negative things, I also see that God has taken a random nobody and he has shown me blessings, he has shown me discipleship, ministry, evangelism, sharing blessings of other people, miracles, testimonies, all of these wonderful, beautiful. God took a random nobody and he believed in me just like he believes in each one of us here. And we can look at people in the gospel like Peter and John and Mary Magdalene and Priscilla and Paul and all of these people who had no training, had no skill, didn't really know about God at all or Jesus, and Jesus chose those people to be his pillars and his leaders of his word. And so when I share my testimony with you, what I want you all to see is that God chose someone like me, a random nobody that didn't know anything about God, and chose me to share his word to others, just like he has chosen all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and just to remind each of us, all of a sudden that random nobody becomes somebody. When you realize, wow, God, just as we sang, he knows my name. So at that point, you're like, I guess it wasn't all too random, and it wasn't all too nobody. But what a powerful, powerful story. Thank you for your testimony. Thank God for your testimony. And that is very exciting. I love to hear when God is working in people's lives. He enters in at different places, right? For an 8-year-old girl with her dog, her sick dog. God entered into your life at different times, different places, under different circumstances, under different needs. But he is faithful and he is good. Today we're going to be looking in John chapter 20 with the emphasis of Jesus' passion with women. Now again, I'm going to restate it because the word is with, not for. Okay, just like what we talked about with suffering 2 weeks ago and death last week, it's his passion with suffering, not passion for suffering. Not passion for death, but passion with death. And today, passion with women, not passion for women. Okay, we don't want to confuse that and somehow think Jesus was some kind of player. Okay, he was not. He is the Lord of life. He is the Messiah. And being accepted so that sin that is inflicted, text, inflicted on others is nixed. We're in John chapter 20, and I'm just going to pick up here. Now Jesus has already died. He was placed in the tomb, and now, 3 days later, chapter 20, now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." So Peter, with the other disciple, they ran. So I'm going to skip over that because next week we're going to talk about Jesus' passion with men. We're going to look how men receive resurrection. But let's just skip past that. Now looking at verse 11, I'll kind of give you a synopsis. Peter and John go to the tomb. They look in, and they go back. Simple enough, okay? That's your quick explanation. But Mary, verse 11, but Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. And as she wept, she stooped to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are the gardener?" She said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he had said these things to her. Jesus' passion with women. Now, I want to explain something real quick because you might be thinking, well, if I'm not a message not apply to me, should I just be like, oh, I'm a guy today? And the answer is no, it absolutely. I'm going to explain that here in just a moment. But the reality is, for women in that culture, in that day, women were not looked on very well. Not well at all. In fact, one of the regular Jewish prayers, this is actually written in what is called the Siddur, which is the Jewish prayer book. Now, what I'm about to tell you is not anti-Semitic against Jewish people. I'm just saying this is a prayer that they have prayed. It's written in their Siddur. I just want to convey, because this was kind of the understanding of women, was God who has a Gentile, a woman, or a slave. You see, the in that day was on the same grounds as a Gentile, one who does not know God or has God's word, and the same as a slave, one who is used and mistreated. Thank you, God, that you've not made me a woman. Again, please hear me. I'm not saying that to be anti-Semitic. It is a prayer that has been written in their Siddur. So when I think about Jesus' day, and when I think about people who are faced against the opposition of life, I think of it as those who are overlooked, those who are the outcast, or being ostracized or being oppressed. Overlooked, outcast, ostracized, or oppressed. You can kind of think of it in directions, because if you're overlooked, that means you're being pressed down. Right? People are looking over you. If you are outcast, then that means that you are sent out. If you're ostracized, it means you're still part of the group, but you're isolated. And if you are oppressed, then that means you're being squeezed in. But Jesus has a passion with women. And what we see in John chapter 20 is actually incredibly stunning. Because Jesus, who is the Lord of life, who has just died on the cross, the suffering of many who put him there, and because of our sin, right, put him on the cross. Death, and now his resurrection, the very first person, and I'm actually going to say people, because I think it's in Mark or Luke, it records it as Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. So John only records Mary Magdalene, but what we understand is there's probably actually a couple Marys here. Okay? And so the first ones to see the resurrected Jesus. Now, what an incredible honor that is. Wouldn't you think? I mean, if you met the resurrected Jesus, that's pretty awesome. But if you were like, no, he showed himself to me first, that's stunning. Now let me just kind of get off track, and I promise we're going to come back, because what I want to share with you is actually really incredible. So there was the tabernacle. The tabernacle was kind of like the place where when people would move, the Israelites would move, they would set up the tabernacle, and that became kind of the place where people would meet, where people would worship, and that the sacrifices that were given, all of that took place at the tabernacle. But in the tabernacle, there was a place that was called the Holy of Holies. It was separated by a curtain. The Holy of Holies, yeah. So it was separated by a curtain. Only the high priest could go into the Holy of Holies, and that only one time a year on the Day of Atonement. The high priest, one time a year, could go into that place on the Day of Atonement. In the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant. Everybody say Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, well done. In the book of Exodus, it actually says it was made of acacia wood and then layered in pure gold. And in the Ark of the Covenant, there were 3 items. I love little quizzes. Any guesses what were the 3 items that were in the Ark of the Covenant? Okay, the 10 Commandments. That's usually a quick one. People are like, 10 Commandments, good. The 2 tablets where Moses wrote the 10 Commandments, they were in the Ark of the Covenant. What else? The staff, Aaron's staff. Remember, it was just a dead piece of wood, and it budded. It actually began to grow leaves and fruit on it. That was in it. One other thing, manna, a jar full of manna, which is amazing because the manna would only last for a day or 2 days if it was the Sabbath. But here's a jar of manna that was kept in the Ark of the Covenant. Isn't that beautiful? The covenant was that place that represented the presence and the power of God. And it had the representation of his rule, of his provision, and of his power. His rule, his provision, his power, and the presence of God and his glory was right there. But right on top of the Ark of the Covenant, everybody stay with me here, there was a special piece of the furniture. Do you know what it was called? I heard it. It's called the mercy seat. Now, the mercy seat was not made of wood. It was actually made of pure gold. And built into that covering was also then, all one piece, 2 angels on either side. They were cherubim, and their wings covered it. And Scripture says in Exodus that would be right, the glory of God would hover right in between those 2 cherubim who are covering the seat. And in Leviticus, we know that on the Day of Atonement, the sacrifices, sorry to get a little bit gross here, but would take the blood of those sacrifices and they would come in and he would sprinkle it on the mercy seat. And when he would do that, what he's doing is he is making atonement, bringing forgiveness for the sins of all of the Israelites. And it was very important that the high priest did that in a very specific way. He didn't want to mess it up, and so he had to go through all of these very, very specific rules and regulations to make sure that he wouldn't die while making atonement for the people, sprinkling blood on the mercy seat, right in the presence of God for the forgiveness of people. With the ruler, God is the all-powerful one, and God is the one who provides. Isn't that great? The mercy seat. Let's get back to our story, shall we? Jesus' passion with women, when he is raised from the dead, do you realize that what Mary or the Marys saw when they peeked into the tomb? They saw the living mercy seat. One angel at the foot, one angel at the head, and there was the representation of the glory of God. Now keep in mind, Peter and John had just looked into the same tomb. But that it was revealed to the Marys. Stood outside the tomb weeping, wondering, where is my Lord? Where did they take him? And they looked in one more time as if maybe I missed him before. And they peek in, and God in his incredible grace looks upon women who have been oppressed and overlooked and ostracized and outcast. And he says, I care enough about you. I'm going to show you the living mercy seat. That thing, that place that was a representation where only one guy could go in once a year. And if he did anything wrong, he was going to die. And these ladies had a glimpse, not into a shadow of a mercy seat, but into the very of God. Talk about a we know Jesus or Mary or the Marys step back and they see Jesus, who they think is the gardener. Oh, please, sir, tell us where you took him. We'll go get him. We'll take him away. You can hear their passion. Where did you take my Lord? And Jesus says, Mary? Remember, he knows my name. All the other times, it's woman. This time, Mary. She didn't know it was Jesus until he said her name. She turned around, and I think as any of our, she threw himself at his feet and worshiped. Says to her, don't cling to me. Which is a little bit of a weird moment, don't you think? Like when I read through that, I'm like, why? Like, well, what's the deal? But here's the reality. In the Old Testament, when the high priest on the Day of Atonement would go in and they would make the sacrifice and all the put the blood on the mercy seat and all of that, no one was allowed to touch the high priest until the atonement was completely finished. And Jesus said to Mary, sorry, I don't think I gave you that. She was the only one to see the living mercy seat. But what happened there in that moment is that the Marys were the only ones to touch the great high priest right in the middle of the atonement. There is no of history who can testify to that. You see, if you touch the high priest when he going to be in trouble. She touched the great high priest. And Jesus said, don't cling to me, because I'm still going to the Father. Go, tell the disciples, I am ascending to the Father and to their Father, to my God and to their God. Isn't that beautiful? No one else. No one else. Remember, Peter and John, they were there. Jesus wasn't there in the tomb, so they hightailed it back. Did they ever see Jesus on the way back? No. This is Passion with Men next week. But for these ladies, their cry, their longing to see Jesus in a culture where they were oppressed and outcast and overlooked and ostracized. That didn't matter to Jesus. In fact, he took that and he said, I care so much about you. When others don't, I do. When others don't call you by name, I'll call you by name. When others don't see you, I see you. When others don't know you, I know you. And I'm inviting you in to see things that others have not seen. My brothers and sisters, the reason why this message is not just about women is because there are all kinds of people who are oppressed, all kinds of people who are being ostracized, all kinds of people or over. Yes, in that day, it was a specific thing toward those who were women as a gender. But for us, it really can be anybody. And realizing that Jesus' passion with women was not just a passion with a specific gender, but a passion with those who are not treated with equality. Caring about people who are often overlooked. It didn't only happen with these Marys. There were often stories throughout the Gospels where you see Jesus' passion and his care for women. One of the popular stories found in John chapter, the woman is caught in adultery, and Jesus, right, he stoops down, he writes in the dirt, that whole thing. And he cares for these women. At the same time, in that, expressing to her, no one is judging you, no one is condemning you, but now go and sin no more. It was a care for these women. His passion needs to be my passion as well. So as you think of women, again, take it beyond just gender. Now, we want to think about people in society, people in our lives who are often overlooked, people who are outcast, maybe people in our own circles. And it may not even be financially related. It may not even be ethnically related. It might just be you're in a group of friends, a group of coworkers, and you know that. And everybody wants to reject them. We all have those people. If you don't have those people, you might be that person. You might be the one where you're feeling like, I do feel overlooked. I do feel like I'm being ostracized or I'm being cast out. So let me give you 4 examples and ways that we can express our passion with women, with those, or anyone who is in one of those categories. Let's begin with the woman in Mark chapter 14. You know that story when Jesus is there and a woman comes. We think it might be Mary Magdalene, but she breaks this bottle of expensive perfume. It's an alabaster jar, and she uses it and she anoints Jesus' feet. And she's weeping and she's wetting his feet with her tears and then with her hair. And one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, was like, what is she doing? She's wasting all of that money. And Jesus was like, you need to stop talking right now, because what she's doing is going to be told for all generations. Whenever the gospel is shared, this story is going to be a reminder of it. Wow. Talk about somebody she had lowered herself, and others were overlooking her worship. They were overlooking her expression of love for Jesus. She was one of the overlooked. My friends, when we find somebody, when we encounter somebody who's being overlooked, here's what we can do with them. We can get down with them and worship Jesus with them. Sometimes worshiping Jesus with them means bringing them to Jesus. Coming alongside them. Not standing over them. Not as the one, like I'm the teacher and you're going to be the student, or I'm the one who knows more and you know less, but rather coming down. And Jesus stood, he spoke up for that woman, and he honored her. You also have the woman at the well. You know that story in John chapter 4? Woman's out there. Nobody else wants to be around this woman because she had just been with a lot of guys. Right? And the guy that she was with now was not her husband. And Jesus knew this. And when you read through that engagement, it's incredible, because you can sense her bitterness. You can sense her skepticism. And yet Jesus is never swayed by that. This woman who was the outcast, Jesus engaged with her. When we find people in our lives who others are, maybe it's our role to engage with them, to draw them back in, to honor them, to not avoid their story, not to avoid the reasons why they're being outcast, but to engage in a loving, meaningful way. In Luke chapter 8, tells us of a woman who was hemorrhaging. She was bleeding for many years, spent all of her money on doctors trying to figure out how to find healing, and she couldn't. Jesus comes walking by right in the midst of a crowd. What does the woman do? She comes up and she touches the hem of his robe. Right then, power exits Jesus, and he knows it. And he looks around and says, who knows? Right? But that was a call for the woman to say, okay, it was me. It was into a confession. But with those who are awesome, this woman was not allowed to be around people in crowds, because she was sick to a level that she couldn't be made well. She was ostracized. And so in those situations, for those who are being ostracized, maybe because it might not be physical sickness. It may be emotional sickness. It might be mental sickness. Whatever it is, it's something that others would look at and go, that's incurable. Stay away. Don't talk to that person. Stay away from them. But having a passion that aligns with Jesus would say, no, I'm going to touch them. I'm actually going to allow them to touch. I'm going to invite them to be a person who says, I'm my situation. And allow Jesus to be the one who heals. In Luke chapter 13, this is the last one, there's a woman with a disabling spirit. I don't know if you know that story. This one is not as well known. But it's a woman who has an evil spirit that actually keeps her hunched over. She's walking around like this, and it's on the Sabbath, and Jesus comes by and he sees this woman. He says, woman, right, be well. And he casts out that moment where she stands up straight. You talk about someone who's being oppressed by evil spirits, hunched over, unable to stand up straight. How many people, maybe not physically, but emotionally, they're hunched over, And they can't emotionally stand up straight. They're so broken in their soul. They're just like, man, I want to do well. I want to stand up, but I can't. And the enemy has just oppressed and drawn into them. And they just can't get up. My brothers and sisters, the passion of Jesus would be to come alongside and to liberate those who are oppressed. To speak into their lives. To realize there are demonic spirits and activities taking place in this person. And in Jesus' name, be gone and allow and help the person to stand upright. To have whatever is bent and out of place brought straight. And I want to tell you this morning, because I know in this room right now, you feel like you are spiritually bent over. You have been trying to walk with Jesus and you just can't seem to catch your stride. You feel oppressed. Maybe you feel like an outcast. Maybe it's hard coming to church because you think, man, if I go to church, I just don't fit in with that group. Or you're trying to fix yourself first before coming. Like, okay, if I just get things right, then I'll. That is a spirit of disabilitating work. It just keeps you hunched over. Liberty and freedom. It can cause you to stand up. Why? Because he knows your name. He knows your name. Patrick, we're going to kind of go into that song, I think. Just that reminder. He knows you. And when you feel like you've been the one kind of on the outside of things, he sees you. When you have felt oppressed by sin, by darkness, he is the one who brings liberation. When you feel like people just overlooked you, you've been trying to worship at Jesus' feet and people just keep overlooking you. He's the one who's going to speak up for you. To fight your own battles. Trying to claw at trying to get yourself seen out of your own oppressions. Maybe it's what you feel like society has put on you. And you're fighting to try to get equality, and I'm telling you, that will be an endless battle. But when you put yourself before Jesus and you just let him start speaking your name, and to know that he sees you, and with him there is no inequality. He does not see one person greater than the other. He does not honor men more than he honors women. He does not honor the rich more than he honors the poor. At the cross, we all come back to eat. And he just wants to say your name. Finding yourself kind of in that moment of like, where did my Lord go? I would like to see Jesus, but I don't even know how to find him. Maybe right now he's calling your name. And right now you're thinking, you know what? I want to respond to Jesus. I want to respond to him, and I want to cling to him. And I want to be a person who worships him. And even if it's in the midst of oppression, if it's in the midst of being outcast or overlooked, I'm not going to make that my main thing. I'm going to make my thing loving and worshiping him. And as I humble myself before him, then he's going to time. Letting him say your name to you. He's just calling to you. Come to me, he would say, come to me, and I'll give you rest. Some of you, you may have been running from Jesus for a long time. He's not angry at you. He's not angry with you. He's inviting you back. Come, my son. Come, my daughter. And enter into this rest.